Today we are going to learn Objective 37. We're going to solve quadratics using the quadratic formula. All right, let's take a look at example 1. Well, before we get to example 1, let's take a look at the quadratic formula. Sorry. So go ahead and get this down, and I will sing it to you. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So this is just a formula, and everybody says, okay, I can plug into the formula if I knew what a, b, and c were. So it'll be this formula when you have ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So a will be the coefficient in front of the x squared. B will be the coefficient in front of the x. And c will be the constant or the number that's by itself. All right, so let's look at example 1. X squared plus 9x plus 20. First of all, is it set equal to 0? Yes, it is set equal to 0. So we're going to use the formula x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So, step 1, let's label a, b, and c. So what do we think a is? Remember, it's got to be in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So a is going to be equal to, read, what's a equal to? A is equal to A is equal to 1. Okay, B is equal to, what number is in the spot here? B is equal to 9. And C is equal to 20. Very good. C is the number that's by itself. All right, so we're going to plug in. Now, instead of plugging into the entire formula, we like to find what's under the radical first, and I think that will help you out. It'll make it much simpler. So I'm only going to focus on doing this part first. It'll just make it easier. So when we plug in, we will have 9 squared minus 4 times 1 times 20. So you can put all of this into the calculator all at once if you would like to. Make sure you use your parentheses. Or you can do it using PEMDAS. We would square first, so that would give you 81. Then you would multiply second. Then you would finally subtract and give you 1. So we're going to use this and plug this into our formula. So this is going to be negative b. I like to sometimes call it the opposite of b. So if b is positive 9, the opposite of that would be negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 1, all divided by 2 times 1, or just 2. My question is, what do you know the square root of 1? Is it perfect? Yes, the square root of 1 is 1. So you can keep going. This will be negative 9 plus or minus 1 all over 2. And the plus or minus, we're going to divide and conquer, and we're going to separate it. And we're going to create two different answers. One by adding the plus, and one by subtracting, or the minus. So this will be negative 9, whoops, excuse me. This will be negative 9 plus 1 divided by 2, or negative 9 minus 1 divided by 2. So when we work this out, it's going to be negative 8 divided by 2, which is equal to negative 4. Or negative 10 divided by 2, which is equal to negative 5. So that says to me, my answer, and you can write it in a set, is negative 4 and negative 5. I'm wondering if I had anybody out there that looked at this first problem and said, I can just factor that. And you totally could. So again, this is just one more way to solve a quadratic. So this one could be completely done by factoring, like what you did yesterday. And it would factor, let's see if I can erase some of this. It would factor into x and x and plus 4 and plus 5. And so we know if we set it equal to 0, x would be negative 4. Because remember yesterday you told me the factors were opposite from where it crosses, and x would be negative 5. That would be a good way to check yourself. What other way could you check? Yes, you could put it into the calculator and you could find your zeros. Or you can always plug and chug and work the two sides out and make sure that they are equal. So you need to work it at least two ways. If you get the same answer twice, then you know you have done it correctly. So let's go to the next one. So a is the same thing as x. So I'm first going to write my formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's label a, b, and c. These are important steps. So a is going to be equal to 1. What would b be equal to? 11. Very good, Reed. And what would c be equal to? Negative 18. All right. I'm going to first, again, before going into the entire formula, I'm just going to work a small chunk of it first. So I'm going to work under the radical. We call this guy the discriminant. That's his name, the discriminant. And so we're going to do the b squared minus 4ac. And I'm going to plug in 11. Make sure you plug in with parentheses. That's very important. Minus 4 times 1 times negative 18. So when you work it out, I'm going to square this first. You get 121. Then I'm going to multiply this. And I would include the negative with the 4. So negative 4 times 1 times negative 18. And that's going to give you positive 72. And when I add that together, I'm going to get 193. So that's what's going to go under the radical. So now let's go and plug in our formula. So the opposite of b is negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 193 all divided by 2 times a, which would be 2 times 1 or just 2. And so here's what I'm going to tell you now. Is 193 perfect? No, 193 is not perfect. So I'm going to let you leave your answer just like that. Okay, when it's not perfect, you can leave it in radical form. Now, I will tell you, you can put this in your calculator, and you can get your zeros. It's going to be a decimal. It's going to be an irrational number, actually, a long, non-repeating, non-terminating decimal. But to do that, if you wanted to do it from here, you could do negative 11 plus the square root of 193 and then divide it by 2. Or you could do negative 11 minus the square root of 193 divided by 2. So if you wanted to check yourself, there are two answers here, one with the plus and one with the minus. That's why we say plus or minus. So if I checked myself in the calculator, it would be negative 11 plus the square root of 193. And you would have to put inner, or if you're going to do it all at once, you'd have to put this in parentheses. Okay, so you either work the entire top, get an answer. I got 2.892443989. I'm going to divide that by 2. I hope you're plugging it in with me. And if I rounded to the nearest hundredth, it would be 1.45, I think. And you would get that, whoops, excuse me. You would get that in the calculator if you did your zeros. You would get this decimal. And then you could do the other one, negative 11 minus the square root of 193. And then divide it by 2. Make sure you put inner or you put the numerator in parentheses. And I ended up with negative 12.45. But I'm going to tell you for this, so I hope you're listening. So everybody listening, clean out your ears. I hope you're listening. I'm going to let you leave your answer just like this on your homework. Negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 193 divided by 2. Okay, you can leave your answer just like that. So, what I'd like for you to do now is I want you to try this one. First of all, I'm going to get you started, and then I want you to hit the pause button, and I want you to try it and see what you get. So, step 1, set it equal to 0. Is it set equal to 0? No. So we need to move the 7 in over, and it needs to go in the middle. That way he's in standard form. Degree of 2, degree of 1, degree of 0. So, if you will, hit the pause button and see what you can do with this one. So hopefully you've hit the pause button and you're joining me back. I'm going to write the formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Let's label a, b, and c. A is going to be equal to 1. B is going to be equal to negative 7. And C is going to be equal to negative 120. Very good. All right, then I'm going to start with my discriminant first. Again, breaking it apart into piece by piece seems to help students with this. Instead of when you plug into the entire formula all at once, people get lost, they get confused, they get overwhelmed. So we're just going to take it piece by piece. So 7 squared minus 4 times 1, oops, and this is negative 7, negative 120. So that's negative 7 squared, sorry about that, and negative 120. So do make sure you put negative 7 in parentheses, because if you don't, you will not get the right answer. So negative 7 squared is 49 positive. Then I'm going to multiply negative 4 times 1 times negative 120. So I'm going to add 480. And when I add 480 to 49, I get 529. So let's plug into our formula. The opposite of b. Now, when I plug in negative 7, the opposite of negative 7, that's a double negative right there. That's going to be positive 7 plus or minus the square root of 529, all divided by 2 times 1, or 2. And that's what your x is going to be equal to. The question is do you leave it right there or can you keep going? You need to check, is 529 a perfect square root? So do second x squared or square root of 529. Yes, he is perfect. He's 23. So you need to keep going. If you can keep going, you need to keep going. So I'm going to break this into 7 plus or minus 23. The square root of 529 is 23 over 2. And then again, you still need to keep going, and you can work this out. 7 plus 23 over 2 or 7 minus 23 over 2. 7 plus 23 is going to be 30 over 2, which is equal to 15. And 7 minus 23 is negative 16 over 2, which is equal to negative 8. So your answer, he is crossing at positive 15 and negative 8. Now, if you put this into your calculator to check, do not forget, you'll probably have to zoom out to get your zeros. Second calc 0, left bound, right bound. Are there any questions? Well, good. So I want you to try this one on your own. See what you can do. If you will, hit the pause button and try it on your own. All right, so hopefully you're back with me. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm going to label a, b, and c. A is equal to 4. B is equal to negative 24. And C is equal to 35. So, let's do our discriminant first. B squared minus 4ac. So negative 24, make sure you put that in parentheses, minus 4 times 4 times 35. So when I put that in the calculator, negative 24 squared is 576. Minus 4, negative 4 times 35 is negative 560. So that's going to be 16. So let's plug in. The opposite of b is going to be a positive 24. Plus or minus the square root of 16, all divided by 2 times 4, which is 8, because it's 2 times a. So a is 4, so 2 times 4 would be 8. So the question is, do you leave it or do you keep going? So 24, we're going to keep going because 16 is perfect. Square root of 16 is 4. So 16 plus, or excuse me, 24 plus or minus 4 over 8. Let's divide and conquer. 24 plus 4 over 8. And then 24 minus 4 over 8. So 24 plus 4 is going to be 28 over 8, which is equal to 7 over 2. And then 24 minus 4 is 20 over 8, which is equal to 5 over 2. So those are your two answers, 7 halves and 5 halves. All right. And again, make sure you check yourself a different way. Either try to factor it or try to put it in your calculator and to check it. So let's look at example 5. Nothing to it but to do it. So try it. Pause the recording. So hopefully you're back with me. We're going to set it equal to 0 first. A is 3, B is -2, and C is -9. So x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's work on our discriminant, b squared ac. Make sure you put -2 in parentheses. A is 3 and b is -9. So this will be 4. -4 times 3 times -9 is positive 108. When I add it all together, I get 112. So the opposite of b would be 2 plus or minus the square root of 112, all divided by 2 times 3, which would be 6, because a is 3. And I'm going to tell you right now, the question is, do you keep going or do you leave it like that? And I'm going to tell you right now, for Algebra 1, I'm going to allow you to leave it just like that. Okay? You can leave it in this form just like that. Okay? Because 112 is not perfect. Again, though, if you check it in your calculator, 112 is an irrational number. It's a non-repeating, non-terminating decimal. You can totally split it apart and check it and go to the decimal. And when you do your left bound, right bound, you'll get the same decimal. But you can leave it just like that for me as far as your homework goes. Okay? So I'm going to leave it right there. Okay? So this one's a little different. It's got two things going on with it. First of all, it's missing the middle term. Secondly, it's got the p squared on the other side. So I'm going to tell you, I never move my p squared. I always want my p squared, my squared term, to be positive. So because he's negative, does everybody understand that? Let me repeat that. I want my squared term to be positive. So if he is negative, I'm going to move him over. So he will become positive. So this will come in front, and this will be +4. Okay? So if this happens, let's label A, B, and C. A is equal to 1. If you don't have a middle term, be equal to 0. And then C is equal to 4. And that's all right. We'll go ahead and work it. So x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's work on our discriminant first. So 0 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4. So this is going to be 0 minus 16, which is -16. Tell me about the square root of a negative number. Square root of a negative number in Algebra 1, you can't do that. Like a lot of you should put in the square root of -16, and some of our calculators are giving us an I answer, but a lot of our calculators are giving us an error. Okay? I'm going to tell you right now, remember how I said all answers in Algebra 1 are real? But once you get to Algebra 2, they'll be imaginary. So I'm going to tell you right now, you have to stop. You should see bright red flashing lights around this guy, because this is not real. And so I'm going to tell you right now, if you get this by using the quadratic formula, this means that your answer has no real solutions, which means if you graphed this, I have a feeling it would look something like this. And the question is, what are we looking for? We're looking for our zeros. We're looking for our x-intercepts. We're looking for our roots. We're looking for our solutions. All of which mean where it's crossing on the x-axis. Where's this one crossing on the x-axis? It's not. So, again, when you get a negative under the radical, and I think there's 2 on your homework sheet, that you're going to get a negative under the radical, that implies to you that there are no real solutions. Okay, so you will stop right there, and for Algebra 1, we'll just say no real solutions. Once you get to Algebra 2, you have to keep going, and you'll learn about imaginaries. But for right now, you just say no real solutions. And here's our last example for the day. Why don't you try it? Hit the pause button, see what you get. Hopefully you're back with me now. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I really hope that some of you have sung this with me, so it wasn't just me singing, FYI. All right, so a is equal to 1, b is equal to negative 8, and c is equal to 16. So let's do our discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. So negative 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times 16. So I'm going to get 64 minus 64, which is equal to 0. Now that means something. But let's keep going. That doesn't mean no solution, just because they cancel. Let's keep going. 0 is a workable number. So the opposite of b, because it's negative b, when I plug in, that's a double negative, that will be positive 8. So if b is negative 8, my opposite of b would be positive 8, plus or minus the square root of 0, all divided by 2. So what is the square root of 0? 0. So we can keep going with this. This is workable. I don't want you to think you can't do it. So 8 plus or minus 0 over 2. Well, let's take a look at it. If I split it apart, 8 plus 0 over 2, 8 minus 0 over 2, this is just going to give me 8 over 2, which is 4. And this is going to give me 8 over 2, which is just 4. So what does this tell me? When I get a 0 on the denominator, how many solutions am I going to have? I'm going to have one solution, and that just means that it's crossing at 4. So if you put it in your calculator, it would just be a one solution answer. So the answer is 4. And you've got a couple like that. I think there's 2 like that on your homework as well, where you get a 0. So if you get a positive number under the radical, if your discriminant is positive, the number under the radical, then you're going to have 2 solutions, 2 real solutions. If you get a negative under the radical, we just talked about it, bright red flashing lights, you can't do that. That implies to you that there is no real solutions. And when you get a 0 under the radical, then that just means, because when you add 0 subtract 0, you're going to get the same thing. That just means that there's going to be one real solution. So hopefully this has been a good lesson for you and that you understand. Thank you very much.